There are places in America where people can disappear in minutes. Not in a crowded city, not on a busy street, but deep inside some of the most remote wilderness in the country. A 7-year-old boy, a 14-year-old girl, a 16-year-old student. 3 people who entered America's national parks and never came home. Their names were Dennis Martin, Stacy Arras, and Trenny Gibson. Their disappearances later became associated with something called Missing 411. But forget the theories for a moment. Let's start with what we actually know. Dennis Martin, June 14, 1969. 7-year-old Dennis Martin was visiting the Great Smoky Mountains with his family. They were near the Spencefield area of the Appalachian Trail, surrounded by thick forest, open mountain grasslands, and steep terrain. Dennis was playing with several other children. Then the children decided to play a simple game. They would hide from the adults and surprise them. The boys split up. Some went one direction. Dennis went another. The other children eventually returned. Dennis didn't. At first, nobody knew there was a problem. He was a child hiding in the woods. Maybe he was still nearby. Maybe he had simply wandered farther than expected. But around 4:30 that afternoon, his family realized he was missing. Dennis was wearing a red shirt, green trousers, and low-cut shoes. The search began. Family members searched the surrounding area. Rangers joined, then volunteers, and the operation continued to grow. But as the afternoon faded, the weather changed. Rain moved across the mountains. The forest became wet, visibility dropped, and darkness was getting closer. Searchers continued through the night. Dogs were brought in. Aircraft searched from above. Military personnel eventually joined the operation. The response became enormous. Hundreds of people would eventually take part in the search for one missing 7-year-old boy. Searchers moved through trails, forested slopes, streams, and surrounding wilderness. But there was one problem. The mountains were not getting smaller, and every hour that passed made the search more difficult. Then morning came, and Dennis was still missing. The search continued, but no discovery ever explained where he had gone. Dennis Martin was never found. More than 50 years later, his disappearance remains a National Park Service cold case. Stacy Arras, 12 years later, another disappearance occurred, this time in Yosemite. July 17, 1981. 14-year-old Stacy Arras was traveling with her father and a group of people through Yosemite's High Sierra. They reached Sunrise High Sierra Camp. Stacy wanted to take photographs, so she started walking toward Sunrise Lakes. A 77-year-old man from the group went with her. For a while, they continued together, but after walking for some distance, the man became tired. He stopped. Stacy continued. That decision would become important. Later, a guide reported seeing Stacy standing on a rock roughly 50 yards from the trail. It was the last reported sighting of her. Then she disappeared. Searchers moved into the area. Dogs were used. Helicopters searched from above. Mountain teams examined trails, rocks, forest, and surrounding terrain. At the height of the operation, around 100 people were involved. But the High Sierra is enormous. Massive granite formations break up the landscape. Trees can block visibility. Trails can bend around rocks and disappear from view. And steep terrain can turn a short distance into a difficult search. Searchers continued looking, but there was no confirmed sighting of Stacy. No discovery that explained what happened, and her camera was never recovered either. Eventually, the active search ended, but the mystery remained. Today, the National Park Service still lists Stacy Arras as a cold case. Trenny Gibson, then there's Trenny Gibson. October 8, 1976. Trenny was 16 years old. She was hiking with a high school group in the Great Smoky Mountains. The students were returning from Andrews Ball toward the Clingman's Dome parking area. The group wasn't moving as one unit. Some students were ahead, others were behind, and at some point, Trenny became separated from the others. Then she disappeared. She never reached the parking area. The group realized she was missing. Searchers returned to the mountain. Trails were checked. The surrounding terrain was searched. Dogs were used. Investigators went back through areas looking for anything that could explain where she had gone. But nothing solved the disappearance. No discovery. No final piece of evidence. No confirmed explanation. And unlike a case where a body or personal belongings are eventually recovered, investigators were left without the evidence needed to establish exactly what happened. Decades later, Trenny Gibson remains on the National Park Service's cold case list. The question: 3 people, 3 disappearances, 2 national parks, and decades without a final answer. This is where Missing 411 enters the story. Researcher David Paulides has argued that some wilderness disappearances share unusual characteristics. And that's what made these cases so fascinating to people around the world. But there's an important distinction. A strange disappearance doesn't automatically mean something supernatural happened. National parks are enormous. People can become lost. They can suffer injuries. Weather can change suddenly. Terrain can hide a person surprisingly quickly. Accidents happen. Crime is possible. And sometimes there simply isn't enough evidence to know what happened. That's why we have to separate what we know from what we think. What we know is this. Dennis Martin disappeared in 1969. Stacy Arras disappeared in 1981. Trenny Gibson disappeared in 1976. And none of them was ever found. That's the part that doesn't need a theory. That's the mystery. Because after search teams, dogs, aircraft, and hundreds of people moving through these mountains, there is still no final answer. Maybe these were 3 completely unrelated tragedies. Maybe the wilderness explains more than we realize. Or maybe there are details in these cases that we still haven't fully understood. And that's why the story doesn't end here. Because these are only 3 cases. There are 2 more, and the circumstances surrounding them raise even more questions. We'll investigate those next.